Now, if you don't mind, I would like to abuse my power of the chairperson and share with you some ideas. My name is Veniamin Popov. I am the coordinator of this group of Strategic Vision, Russia and the Islamic World. We have an extensive program prepared for our deliberations, and our chairman decided to make this forum a regular annual conference. So today, this is our meeting here in Moscow, which will not be the last meeting. We'll organize this in the future in Moscow, maybe with broader participation, maybe not necessarily in Moscow, but some other cities, St. Petersburg, Kazan. But we'll definitely get together journalists every year. That's the decision of the chairman of our group, the president of Tatarstan. Now, some of my personal views. I'm a professional diplomat. I used to be an ambassador in some Arab countries. And I have dealt with the Middle Eastern problems throughout my professional career. I would like to start with some sad maybe ideas, but this is the reality. So recent tragic events in Paris, the terrorist attack against the Russian passenger plane over Sinai, the elimination by the Turkish Air Force of the Russian bombers in the Syrian skies. All these events were covered by international mass media, and it received great coverage, and all this showed how complex and how dangerous is the moment that humanity is living through now. That's not an exaggeration. This is a fact of life. In the recent months, we have witnessed several waves of violence, of violent acts committed by terrorists in various parts of the world. So we witnessed such acts in Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, African countries, and claimed many lives. The headlines in newspapers in recent days are full of pessimism. What is important at the present stage is not to give in to these pessimist sentiments, to mobilize our forces to overcome this alarming tendency. And the great importance here belongs to
mass media. The profession of journalists is something that people now equal to soldiers on the battlefield. At the same time, a journalist must be a good-willed oracle. When telling people about the recent events, you have to refer to the best qualities of the human nature: conscience, honesty, and a positive approach toward overcoming difficulties and solving problems. I'm not a journalist myself, but we have a number of prominent journalists with us today, and I would like to introduce them. One of them is someone who is called the Golden Pen of Russia, formerly an editor-in-chief of one of Russia's major newspapers, and now head of the television school in the Moscow State University. His name is Vitaly Tretyakov. And the second person I would like to introduce represents the future of Russian journalism, if I may say so. A brilliant broadcast journalist who has worked in a number of countries, including the United States, Veniamin Popov. They will share their thoughts with you in their presentations, and that's important for us. Terrorism is a phenomenon that has gone global, that has become an international phenomenon in the first half of the 21st century. The reasons for that are complex, and we will discuss that in detail. You cannot associate terrorism with a single ethnicity, nation, religious group, or belief. wherever they act or operate, terrorist groups only pursue their own interests, which is gaining wealth, gaining power, and sometimes even a pretense at global domination. To that end, they use various slogans, political, ideological, religious, including the slogan of protecting Islam from the infidels. Politicians and ringleaders use that to manipulate the masses using state-of-the-art methods of manipulation. We must admit that their operations, their activities very often do produce results. In many countries of the so-called developing world, as well as in developed economies, many young people now find themselves in a difficult situation, and they resort to alternative ways of life and ways of operation, and they easily fall prey to radical ideologues who promise them that their hopes will be implemented very fast, and they will be rewarded for what they call a decent life, a dignified life. What is a problem is that in many Western countries there is an association now made in the public discourse between terrorism and Islam. This is helped by some of the careless terms that are being thrown into the discourse, such as the jihadism, the shahids, the Islamists, and so on. This casts a shadow onto an entire religion and discredits an entire religion which has nothing to do with terrorism. It is a great global religion. In some 8 or 9 years from now, the number of Muslims in the world will be greater than the number of Christians of all denominations. At the same time, constant references to Islamic terrorism lead to Islamophobia. Just look at what's going on in France, where the National Front is now winning at the municipal election right now. We depart from the pretext that it is important to deal with this plague of the 21st century, which is terrorism, with military force alone. This requires a complex, combined, comprehensive effort, and there's a special responsibility, a special role to be played by those part of the Reporters Guild, by journalists, and there's especially needs to be a role for the young. Young people always tend to be ambitious, to have great plans and expectations. They tend to lean toward novelty, to be critical of the past. They have great expectations. They can be very romantic or radical in their nihilism. They can be very defiant and intolerant toward the existing rules and norms of their parents. A lot of them have not been burned by life so far, and they go recklessly into various enterprises and endeavors without realizing how risky they may are or how dangerous they might be for others. One of the problems also is this virus of consumerism that now contaminates society from society, undermining century-old values. When your job and shopping seeks to take the place formerly occupied by family, church, and other values. The Islamic world has a number of peculiar features which make it more vulnerable than other cultures, and that is the fact that a lot of the young people in Muslim nations are unemployed. That is 30 to 35% in the Middle East and North Africa. The fact that those young people are unable to implement their expectations and dreams, it sort of pushes them to seek opportunities outside their home village or city or country, and that leads to the increasing flow of illegal, both and as well as legal migrants. They often find themselves in an alien environment, not understanding the new rules in a big urban environment, and that seeks them to look for new points where they can find support, and they often fall into the hands of radical Islamic preachers and recruiters from terrorist groups. Their affiliation with a certain group, a certain social group, also plays a big role here. Just look at ISIS, how they have been using young people very effectively by appointing them a salary of $2,000 plus the loot. And those young people, they suddenly realize that now that they have an assault rifle, they can pretty much do whatever they want. It isn't difficult to forecast the behavior of young people who have their own ambition when they are suddenly persuaded that by joining Daesh, they step onto the righteous path. They start feeling as the masters of life, living in the right kind of state and ruling over others. You also have to bear in mind the psychological effect of the ISIS promise, the promise of restoring the caliphate, linked to the concept of a jihad to make those plans reality. I think we all understand how important it is to contradict this by the positive values of respect for a human being, respect for the national traditions, the love for peace and tolerance. We also need to bear in mind that the order of the socium, of the society, and the harmony in it